The night was drenched in rain, with flashes of lightning tearing through the sky like jagged scars. Inside the opulent Veronique mansion, a world of luxury unfolded, a marble staircase spiraling like a divine helix, chandeliers dripping with crystals that reflected light in every direction, and walls adorned with priceless art collected from every corner of the globe. Yet, in all this splendor, a young woman stood by the grand bay window, gazing at the storm outside with a mix of frustration and boredom. This was Veronique, a 28-year-old heiress with wealth beyond imagination. Her silky red gown, tailored to perfection, clung to her figure, and her diamond necklace sparkled with every faint glow of lightning. But beneath her polished exterior was a storm of insecurity and arrogance. For Veronique, life was a never-ending quest to prove her worth, not to herself, but to a family that never seemed to care. Downstairs, in the quiet corners of the mansion, another figure moved silently. Helena, the family's longtime maid, was tidying the rarely used rooms with precision. Her movements were deliberate, as though each action carried a purpose beyond its surface. Helena was in her mid-30s, with striking features hidden beneath the simplicity of her uniform. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and her calm demeanor masked a past no one in the Veronique household could have guessed. As Helena worked, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. She reached a dimly lit storage room, where stacks of old boxes and forgotten relics collected dust. While searching for a misplaced vase, her hand brushed against an old wooden chest, its surface worn but its golden lock still intact. Curiosity piqued. She gently opened the chest and found a bundle of yellowed papers tied with a crimson ribbon. Among them were letters, photographs, and what appeared to be legal documents. Helena's breath caught. The handwriting on one of the letters was unmistakable. It belonged to someone from her past, a name she hadn't spoken in years, a name tied to the pain and loss that had driven her to the life she led now. As she flipped through the papers, her fingers trembled. The documents revealed something shocking about the Veronique family's wealth, something that could change everything if brought to light. Unbeknownst to her, Veronique had wandered downstairs, drawn by the faint creak of the storage room door. She stopped short, watching Helena intently from the shadows. The maid's absorbed expression made Veronique's brow furrow with suspicion. What could a maid possibly find so interesting in a dusty old chest? "Helena," Veronique called sharply, stepping into the room. Her tone was icy, laced with condescension. "What are you doing here?" Helena quickly shut the chest and turned, her face calm but her mind racing. "Just organizing, Miss Veronique," she replied, masking her discovery. Veronique eyed the chest but said nothing more. Something about Helena's composed demeanor irritated her, as it always did. It wasn't the first time she'd felt this way. The maid's unshakable tranquility, her grace even under the weight of servitude, was a quiet defiance to Veronique's need for superiority. Later that night, as the storm raged on, Veronique lay in bed, her mind replaying the scene in the storage room. What could Helena have found? A seed of mistrust was planted, and as it grew, so did an idea, a cruel one, yet strangely satisfying. If Helena was hiding something, Veronique would uncover it, and she knew just the way to start. What secret lies within the dusty chest? And how will it change the fate of both Veronique and Helena? Stay tuned to find out as this story of wealth, deception, and redemption unfolds. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring more captivating tales like this to life. The rain had ceased by morning, leaving the Veronique estate shrouded in a grey mist that clung to the sprawling gardens. Veronique, seated at the grand dining table with a steaming cup of tea in hand, replayed the events of the previous night, her sharp mind fixated on the maid. Helena, that chest, those papers, there was something there. Despite her outward confidence, Veronique had always felt an inexplicable unease around Helena. It wasn't just Helena's composed demeanor or the way she carried herself with an elegance that seemed out of place for a maid. No, it was something deeper. Helena had a presence, a quiet authority that Veronique resented. In her heart, she knew that this resentment stemmed from envy, a feeling she hated to admit. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, an idea began to take shape in Veronique's mind. If Helena wanted to keep secrets, Veronique would ensure they were exposed, but in a way that humiliated her. A cruel smile played on her lips. The annual Veronique family gala, celebrating her birthday, was only days away. This year, the party would be more than just a display of wealth. It would be a stage for her vengeance. Later that day, Veronique approached Helena in the drawing room, where the maid was meticulously dusting the intricate carvings of an antique cabinet. The heiress's tone was uncharacteristically pleasant, almost saccharine. "Helena," Veronique began, her voice smooth but edged with malice. "I've been thinking, you've worked so tirelessly here, and I feel you've never truly been acknowledged for your efforts." Helena paused, turning to face her employer with a mix of surprise and caution. "Thank you, Miss Veronique," she said softly, unsure of where this was leading. "Every year, my birthday gala is the most anticipated event among the elite," Veronique continued, feigning excitement. "And this year, I've decided to make it truly special. I'd like you to attend as my guest of honor." Helena blinked, her composure faltering for a brief moment. "Me, Miss Veronique?" "At the gala?" "Yes, of course," Veronique replied, her smile widening. "You've been a loyal part of this household. It's time for you to see the world beyond these walls. Consider it my gift to you." Helena hesitated, her instincts warning her that this sudden generosity was out of character. But the thought of stepping into a world she had only glimpsed from the sidelines was tempting. "I don't have anything appropriate to wear," she said, hoping to gently decline. "Oh, don't worry about that," Veronique said with a dismissive wave. "I'll have something arranged. Trust me, you'll look unforgettable." In the days leading up to the gala, Veronique set her plan in motion. She contacted her personal stylist with specific instructions to create a gown for Helena that was garish and exaggerated, an ensemble that would make her stand out in all the wrong ways. "Make it bright, bold, and completely over the top," Veronique had said. Something no one would ever take seriously. The stylist, accustomed to Veronique's whims, did as instructed, creating a dress that was both ostentatious and ill-fitting. Meanwhile, Veronique spread whispers among her circle of friends, hinting at a special guest who would be the centerpiece of the evening. Helena, unaware of the trap being set, prepared herself as best she could. The dress arrived 2 days before the event. A bright, shimmering gold creation with oversized bows and an awkward silhouette. Helena's initial reaction was one of shock, but she reminded herself that this was a world she didn't understand. If Veronique thought this was appropriate, who was she to question it? On the day of the gala, Helena stood in front of the mirror, her reflection both unfamiliar and unsettling. The dress felt like a costume, but she convinced herself to push past the discomfort. This was an opportunity to step out of her usual role, even if just for one night. As evening fell, the Veronique estate transformed into a wonderland of luxury and extravagance. A red carpet stretched across the driveway. Flanked by glowing lanterns, guests arrived in sleek cars, their couture gowns and tailored suits shimmering under the light of chandeliers suspended from towering trees. Helena arrived alongside Veronique, who had insisted they share the same car. The moment they stepped out, the air was filled with whispers and stifled laughter. Helena, in her golden dress, was a stark contrast to the understated elegance of the other guests. Cameras flashed as reporters and socialites speculated about her identity. "This is Helena," Veronique announced loudly, her voice dripping with feigned affection. "She's been a part of our family for years. I thought it would be lovely to have her join us tonight." The words were sweet, but the smirk on Veronique's face betrayed her true intentions. She had carefully positioned Helena as a target for ridicule, and the crowd quickly followed her lead. The guests exchanged amused glances, their hushed comments cutting through the air like knives. Helena, though aware of the awkward stares, maintained her composure, refusing to give Veronique the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. As the night progressed, Veronique paraded Helena from one group to another, subtly mocking her under the guise of introductions. "Isn't her dress stunning?" she'd say, her tone laced with sarcasm. "I wanted her to shine tonight." Helena, though out of her element, responded with grace. Her quiet dignity began to disarm some of the guests, who found themselves drawn to her sincerity. Despite Veronique's efforts, not everyone joined in the mockery. A few even began to question why Veronique had brought Helena in the first place. As the evening wore on, Helena couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Veronique's behavior, the strange looks from the guests, and the overwhelming spectacle of the event all felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet assemble. But one thing was clear: Veronique's intentions were far from kind. In a brief moment of solitude, Helena retreated to the terrace, the cool night air a welcome reprieve from the oppressive atmosphere inside. She gazed at the glittering city lights in the distance, her mind drifting back to the chest and the secrets it contained. If Veronique knew what was in those documents, this night would likely take a very different turn. Unbeknownst to Helena, Veronique was watching her from the shadows. The heiress's eyes narrowed as she observed the maid standing alone, her posture calm despite the humiliation she must have felt. This wasn't how Veronique had envisioned the night. Helena wasn't breaking. She wasn't retreating into herself. Instead, she seemed resolute. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crept into Veronique's mind. What if Helena wasn't as powerless as she seemed? The Veronique mansion gleamed like a jewel against the coastal night, illuminated by a cascade of lights that spilled onto the cliffs below. It was a spectacle meant to dazzle, and the annual gala was no exception. Guests from the highest echelons of society arrived in sleek luxury cars, greeted by the soft glow of lanterns lining the red carpet. The air buzzed with anticipation, whispers of glamour and scandal already weaving through the crowd. Helena sat in the backseat of a black car, her hands folded neatly over the garish golden dress Veronique had chosen for her. The fabric shimmered obnoxiously under the dim light, and oversized bows sat awkwardly on her shoulders, making her feel like a wrapped gift meant for ridicule. Despite her unease, Helena maintained her composure, determined to carry herself with dignity, even as Veronique's plans began to unfold. As the car came to a stop, Veronique stepped out first, her sapphire blue gown flowing like liquid silk. She was the picture of elegance, a true queen of the evening. Cameras flashed as reporters jostled for her attention. Then came Helena. The moment she emerged, the crowd hushed briefly, a ripple of whispers following. "Who's that? Is she serious with that dress? Must be some sort of joke." Veronique turned, her perfectly rehearsed smile fixed in place. "Everyone," she announced, her voice carrying a mix of charm and mockery. "This is Helena, my special guest for the evening. She's been an integral part of our household, and I thought it was time she joined us for a proper celebration." The guests exchanged bemused looks, their expressions ranging from polite curiosity to thinly veiled amusement. Helena, feeling their stares burn into her, straightened her posture and gave a small nod, refusing to let her discomfort show. Veronique's satisfaction was palpable as she led Helena into the grand ballroom. The ballroom was nothing short of magnificent. Chandeliers hung like cascades of frozen light, and the polished marble floor gleamed underfoot. Tables were adorned with intricate floral arrangements and glimmering crystal glasses, each filled with champagne imported from the finest vineyards in France. Guests milled about, draped in designer couture that whispered of understated elegance and obscene wealth. Helena felt as if she'd stepped into another world, a world that seemed both surreal and suffocating. Every pair of eyes seemed to find her, lingering just a moment too long before turning away with smirks or whispers. Veronique, playing the perfect hostess, introduced Helena to one group after another. "This is Helena," she said with exaggerated warmth. "She's been with us for years. I thought it was only right to let her experience the finer things for a change." The remarks, though cloaked in civility, cut like knives. "What an interesting choice of attire," one woman commented, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's so bold." "Yes," Veronique replied, her smile widening. "Helena has such unique taste. Helena responded politely, her calm demeanor disarming some of the more vicious comments. But Veronique wasn't done. She led Helena to a circle of young elites, their conversation revolving around art, finance, and the latest advancements in technology. "Helena," one of the men said, barely concealing his amusement, "what are your thoughts on the impact of blockchain on emerging markets?" Helena hesitated, knowing the question was meant to mock her. "I'm afraid that's not my area of expertise," she replied with quiet confidence, "but I'd imagine its impact depends on how it's implemented." Her response, though measured, was met with a ripple of laughter. Veronique smiled, relishing the spectacle. The night was proceeding exactly as she'd planned, until an unexpected guest arrived. The room fell silent as the doors swung open, revealing a man in his 60s with silver hair and a commanding presence. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit, his every movement exuding confidence. Guests whispered his name in hushed tones, Philippe Renard, a renowned historian and philanthropist. Philippe scanned the room briefly before his gaze settled on Helena. His eyes widened in recognition, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Helena?" he said, his voice carrying across the room. The unexpected familiarity caught everyone's attention, including Veronique, who froze mid-sip of champagne. Helena, startled, turned to face the man. "Mr. Renard," she said softly, a faint smile touching her lips. "You've been hiding, my dear," Philippe said, approaching her with open arms. "The world thought we'd lost you." Veronique's confusion quickly turned to unease. "You know each other?" she asked, trying to mask her growing anxiety. Philippe chuckled. "Know her? Helena was once one of the brightest minds of our generation. She's the reason several historic artifacts were preserved. Her expertise and generosity have touched countless lives." Gasps rippled through the room as guests turned their full attention to Helena. Veronique's carefully constructed plan began to crumble as whispers of admiration replaced the earlier mockery. Philippe's words painted a picture of a woman vastly different from the maid Veronique had sought to humiliate. "Helena," Philippe continued, his tone serious now, "why did you disappear from the world stage? You were at the peak of your career." Helena hesitated, glancing briefly at Veronique before answering. "Sometimes, stepping away is necessary. It's not always about what we gain but what we leave behind." Her cryptic response only deepened the intrigue. Philippe pressed on. "You've been working here, haven't you, for the Veronique family?" "Yes," Helena replied simply. "Remarkable," Philippe said, shaking his head. "Even when you could have chosen a life of luxury, you opted for humility." Veronique, struggling to regain control of the narrative, interrupted. "I wasn't aware of your impressive background." "Helena," she said, her voice tight, "you've been very modest." Helena met Veronique's gaze, her expression unreadable. Modesty isn't a choice when it's a necessity. The tension in the room was palpable. Veronique's humiliation was complete, but it wasn't the kind she'd envisioned. The very woman she'd sought to demean had stolen the spotlight, not as a laughingstock, but as a figure of respect and intrigue. As the evening wore on, more guests approached Helena, each curious to learn more about her story. Veronique watched helplessly as her carefully curated image of superiority was overshadowed by the unassuming maid she'd underestimated. At one point, Philippe raised a glass in a toast. "To Helena," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration, a reminder that true greatness lies not in wealth or status, but in the choices we make to better the world. The room erupted in applause, and for the first time that night, Helena allowed herself a genuine smile. Veronique, standing on the periphery, felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, envy, and something she hadn't felt in years: humility. The night grew deeper, and the energy in the ballroom shifted from idle gossip to an intense undercurrent of curiosity. Guests who had initially dismissed Helena as a sideshow were now captivated, hanging on Philippe Renard's every word as he unraveled the mystery of the maid who seemed to hold more secrets than anyone imagined. Veronique, standing near the edge of the crowd, felt her chest tighten. This was supposed to be her night, a spectacle of her wealth and power. Yet here was Helena, commanding the room in a way Veronique never could. Worse still, there was a name Philippe mentioned earlier that gnawed at her mind, Helena Sinclair. As the applause for Philippe's toast quieted, Veronique stepped forward, her lips curved in a practiced smile. "Mr. Renard," she began, her voice steady but tinged with suspicion. "You seem to know Helena quite well. May I ask, who is she?" "Really?" Philippe turned to her, his expression a mix of surprise and mild reproach. "Ah, Veronique," he said, "I would have thought you'd know." Helena Sinclair was once the rising star of the European archaeology world, a prodigy who not only preserved artifacts, but also founded a network to combat illegal artifact trafficking. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the guests began whispering, pulling out their phones to search the name. The results came swiftly. Images of a younger Helena standing beside priceless artifacts in grand museums, headlines praising her achievements, and even awards ceremonies where she had been the guest of honor. Veronique felt her stomach drop. How had she never known? How could someone so extraordinary end up working as a maid? Why would she give all that up? She asked, her voice sharper than intended. Helena, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as she began to speak. "I didn't give it up entirely," Helena said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of years of reflection. "I left because I had no choice. My work wasn't just about preserving history, it was about protecting lives." The crowd leaned in closer, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. "A few years ago," Helena continued, her gaze steady, "I uncovered a smuggling ring that was laundering stolen artifacts through high-profile auctions. The people involved weren't just criminals, they were some of the wealthiest and most influential individuals in Europe. When I exposed them, I became a target." She paused, her voice faltering for the first time. "One night, they came for my family. My parents, they didn't survive." Gasps echoed through the room, and several guests covered their mouths in shock. Even Veronique, who had been desperate to regain control of the evening, felt her breath hitch. She had expected some dramatic revelation, but nothing of this magnitude. "I fled," Helena said, her voice regaining its strength. "I left behind my career, my life, everything. For years, I lived in hiding, taking on small jobs to stay under the radar. Eventually, I ended up here." The room was silent, the weight of Helena's story pressing down on everyone. But then Philippe, who had been quietly observing her, spoke again. "Helena, forgive me for asking, but why this house? Why the Veronique family?" Helena hesitated, her eyes flickering to Veronique. "At first, it was coincidence," she said. "I needed a job, and this one was available. But then I discovered something that tied this family to the same network I'd been fighting to dismantle." A collective gasp swept through the room. Veronique's face turned pale as she stammered, "What are you talking about?" Helena's gaze was unwavering. "Your father, Veronique. He wasn't just a businessman. He was one of the key financiers of the smuggling operation. The wealth you've enjoyed all your life? It came from stolen history, from blood money." The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered furiously, some even stepping back from Veronique, as if her proximity might tarnish them. Veronique herself staggered, her mind reeling. That's not true," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "I didn't want to believe it either," Helena said, her voice softening just enough to convey the conflict she'd felt. "But I found the proof. In the storage room of this house, I came across documents, ledgers, invoices, and letters. Your father's signature is on all of them." She held up a leather-bound folder, which she had hidden beneath her shawl. "This," she said, "is the legacy he left behind." Philippe stepped forward, examining the folder briefly before addressing the crowd. "This is damning evidence," he said solemnly. "It's clear that Helena didn't come here to serve. She came here to uncover the truth." Veronique's legs felt like they might give out beneath her. "I didn't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea." Helena's expression softened slightly. "I believe you," she said, "but ignorance doesn't absolve us of responsibility. What you do with this knowledge now, that's what will define you." The weight of Helena's words hung heavy in the air. Veronique looked around the room, seeing the judgment in the eyes of her peers. For the first time in her life, she felt truly exposed, not for her wealth or her status, but for the emptiness of the image she had spent so long cultivating. I want to make it right," she said, her voice trembling. "Tell me how. Tell me what I can do." Helena regarded her for a long moment before nodding. "Start by using the resources you have to undo the damage. Fund restoration projects, return stolen artifacts, and support the families who were hurt." Veronique nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes." As the guests began to recover from the shock of the night, the mood in the room shifted. The story of Helena St. Clair, the maid who had uncovered the sins of her employer's past, became a powerful lesson for everyone present. It wasn't just about the Veronique family. It was about confronting their own complicity in a world that often valued wealth over integrity. Helena, now standing tall in the very dress meant to ridicule her, became the evening's true star. And as she walked away from the crowd, Philippe followed, his voice warm with admiration. "You've done more than expose the truth tonight, Helena," he said. "You've reminded us all of what truly matters." Veronique, left standing alone in the center of the ballroom, felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't known in years: humility. The grand ballroom, once filled with laughter and light-hearted conversations, had descended into a heavy silence. The shocking revelations about Helena and the Veronique family's dark history lingered in the air like a storm about to break. Veronique stood frozen at the center of the room, her polished exterior now a fragile shell cracking under the weight of Helena's words. Helena remained calm, her gaze steady, but filled with an unmistakable intensity. She had come prepared for this moment, knowing that exposing the truth would require courage and resolve. Around them, the guests, once captivated by Veronique's charm and wealth, now turned their attention to Helena. Their curiosity mingled with discomfort. "No," Veronique said, her voice trembling but defiant. "You're lying. My father may not have been perfect, but he wasn't a criminal." Helena tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Lying?" she repeated softly. "I have the documents, Veronique. They're signed by your father, detailing every transaction, every artifact sold, every bribe paid to keep the operation running." She held up the leather-bound folder once more, its presence as damning as a gavel striking down judgment. "But if you'd like to call me a liar," she continued, her tone sharpening, "then go ahead. Prove me wrong." Veronique faltered, her lips parting as if to respond, but no words came. The weight of the accusations, combined with the murmurs of the guests around her, seemed to sap her strength. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "You think you can come into my house and accuse my family like this? Who do you think you are?" Helena stepped forward, her calm demeanor unshaken. "I'm someone who lost everything because of your family's greed," she said, her voice steady. "My parents, my career, my safety. I came here not for revenge, but for answers, and now to make sure the truth is known." The guests, sensing the rising tension, began to murmur among themselves. Some looked at Veronique with pity, others with disdain. One guest, a middle-aged woman draped in pearls, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I always suspected her family's fortune wasn't as clean as they claimed." A young man in a tailored suit added, "If this is true, what does it say about all of us? We've celebrated their wealth for years without question." The words stung Veronique like a whip. Her gaze darted around the room, searching for allies, but all she found were averted eyes and whispers. She turned back to Helena, her desperation bleeding into anger. "You've made your point," she snapped. "But why wait until now? If you knew all this, Why didn't you go to the authorities? Why stay here? Pretending to be a maid, Helena took a deep breath, her composure never wavering. Do you think I didn't try? She asked, her voice tinged with pain. The authorities were bought off. The people I trusted turned their backs on me. This operation isn't just your father. It's an entire network of powerful individuals protecting each other. She paused, letting her words sink in. I stayed because this house holds the evidence I needed to expose them. Your father's carelessness was his weakness. He kept records of everything, thinking no one would ever find them. Helena stepped closer, her voice lowering to a dangerous calm. And you've lived your entire life in denial, enjoying the fruits of his crimes without ever questioning their source. Maybe you didn't know the details, Veronique, but you knew enough. Veronique's face turned pale, her breath shallow as Helena's words hit her like a tidal wave. For years, she had basked in her family's wealth and status, never daring to question the cracks beneath the polished surface. Now, the foundation of her world was crumbling before her eyes. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I didn't know. I would have stopped him if I had known. Helena's gaze softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. It's too late to stop him now, Veronique. But it's not too late to take responsibility. Veronique's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched her champagne glass. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking. An apology? Money? What will fix this? Helena stared at her, a flicker of sadness crossing her face. I don't want anything from you, she said. But there are people out there, families, like mine, who deserve justice. Start there. Before Veronique could respond, a voice rang out from the crowd. Helena's right, said Philippe Renard, stepping forward. His commanding presence silenced the room. The Veronique family has profited from pain and theft, and it's time to make amends. He turned to the guests, his voice rising with conviction. But this isn't just about them. How many of us have turned a blind eye to the corruption that surrounds us? How many of us have benefited from systems built on exploitation? The guests shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding his gaze. Philippe continued, his tone unyielding. Tonight isn't just a reckoning for Veronique, it's a reckoning for all of us, and it starts with facing the truth. Veronique's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she sank into a chair, her shoulders trembling. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know where to start. Helena approached her, her expression softer now. Start by listening, she said. Start by using your privilege to help those who've suffered because of your family's actions. It won't erase the past, but it's a beginning. Veronique looked up at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and gratitude. I'll try, she said. I'll try to make it right. As the tension began to ease, the guests found themselves reflecting on their own lives and choices. The grandeur of the ballroom, once a symbol of opulence, now felt hollow in the face of the truths laid bare. Conversations shifted from superficial gossip to meaningful discussions about accountability and change. Helena, sensing the shift, stepped back into the crowd. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of closure. The truth had been revealed, and while the road ahead would be long, it was one worth traveling. The guests began to disperse from the ballroom, their once vibrant chatter replaced with murmurs of introspection. The night's grandeur now felt hollow against the revelations that had shaken the Veronique estate. Veronique herself remained seated, her head bowed, and her once confident demeanor replaced with an air of vulnerability. It was a side of her no one had ever seen. Helena stood nearby, her presence still commanding but no longer intimidating. Her calm, steady gaze remained fixed on Veronique, not with judgment, but with something unexpected, compassion. Helena, Veronique said softly, breaking the silence that hung heavy between them. Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. I don't even know where to begin. Helena didn't respond immediately. She crossed the room slowly, her footsteps echoing in the now quiet space. Stopping a few feet from Veronique, she finally spoke. You've already begun, Veronique. Admitting you were wrong is the first step. Veronique looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with tears. I've been so blind, as she admitted. I thought I had everything, but I was wrong. My family's wealth, my status, it all feels meaningless now. Helena's gaze softened further. Wealth and status aren't inherently meaningless, she said. It's how you use them that defines their worth. You have a choice now, to let this be the end of your story or the beginning of something new. Veronique nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. I don't want this to be the end, she said, her voice gaining strength. I want to do something meaningful, not just for me, but for the people my family has hurt. Helena studied her carefully, searching for sincerity in her words. Then it starts with action, she said. Words are easy, but change is hard. Are you ready for that? I am, Veronique said firmly. Tell me where to start. Helena hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. First, she said, you need to take responsibility for your family's actions. Publicly, use your platform to admit the truth and support efforts to return what was stolen. Veronique swallowed hard, the thought of facing public scrutiny daunting. But she nodded. I'll do it, she said. It's the least I can do. Good, Helena said. And then, you need to listen. Listen to the people who've been hurt, understand their pain, and find ways to make it right. This isn't about erasing guilt. It's about creating something better. Meanwhile, the remaining guests lingered in small groups, their conversations somber. Philippe Renard, standing near a grand window overlooking the ocean, spoke to a cluster of influential figures. This isn't just about the Veronique family, he said. It's about all of us. How many of us have looked the other way when it was convenient? How many of us have profited from systems that harm others? His words struck a chord, and several guests nodded in agreement. One woman, a prominent philanthropist, spoke up. We can't change the past, but we can decide what we do moving forward. Maybe tonight is a wake-up call for all of us. As the ballroom emptied, Helena found herself alone on the terrace, the cool night air a welcome reprieve from the emotional intensity of the evening. The stars above seemed to shine brighter than usual, as if offering a small glimmer of hope. She thought about her parents, about the life she had left behind, and about the journey that had brought her here. For years, she had carried the weight of her past alone, driven by a singular purpose to expose the truth. Now that it was done, a sense of peace began to settle over her, but there was still work to do. The truth alone wasn't enough. Justice required action, and Helena was ready to see it through. Helena, Veronique's voice called softly from behind. Helena turned to see the heiress standing in the doorway, a tentative but genuine expression on her face. I wanted to thank you, Veronique said, stepping onto the terrace. Not just for tonight, but for everything. For showing me the truth, even when I didn't want to see it. Helena nodded. You're welcome, she said simply. Veronique hesitated, then continued. I know I can't undo the past, but I'd like to start by supporting the causes you care about. Restoration projects, education, whatever you think will make a difference. Helena raised an eyebrow. This isn't about throwing money at the problem, she said. It's about being involved, learning, understanding, and making sacrifices. I understand, Veronique said, her voice steady. And I'm willing to do that. Helena studied her for a long moment, then extended a hand. If you're serious, then let's start tomorrow. Veronique took her hand, a small smile breaking through the remnants of her tears. Tomorrow, she agreed. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the estate, Helena and Veronique began their work. Together, they sorted through the documents Helena had uncovered, making plans to return stolen artifacts and support the communities that had been wronged. News of the Veronique family's public admission spread quickly, sparking a broader conversation about accountability and redemption. Helena's story, once hidden in the shadows, became a beacon of hope, inspiring others to confront their own truths and take meaningful action. For Veronique, the journey was just beginning, but for the first time in her life, She felt a sense of purpose, one that wasn't tied to wealth or status, but to the possibility of making a genuine difference. The first rays of dawn spilled over the Veronique estate, bathing the mansion in a golden light that seemed almost symbolic of a new beginning. The gala, with all its revelations and drama, was over. But the ripples it had caused were far from settling. For both Helena and Veronique, the night had been a turning point, a moment that demanded reflection and action. In the days that followed, Helena's story spread far beyond the walls of the estate. News outlets and social media buzzed with the tale of the former archaeologist turned maid who had exposed a powerful family's hidden past. But Helena remained grounded, her focus fixed on the work ahead. She began collaborating with restoration experts, returning stolen artifacts to their rightful homes, and launching initiatives to support communities affected by the smuggling network. For Helena, it wasn't about fame, it was about justice and making a tangible difference. As she packed her modest belongings to leave the Veronique estate, Veronique appeared at her door, carrying a small box. "I thought you might want this," she said, handing Helena the leather-bound folder of documents that had started it all. "It belongs to you now." Helena accepted the box with a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "But this isn't the end for you, Veronique. This is just the beginning." For Veronique, the journey was more personal. She had spent years living in denial, her privilege shielding her from the consequences of her family's actions. Now, she was determined to make amends. She publicly admitted to her family's role in the smuggling operation, pledging her wealth to fund projects that would return artifacts and support the affected communities. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, backlash from the public, and whispers among her peers. But for the first time, Veronique felt a sense of purpose. She also stayed in touch with Helena, often seeking her guidance. Their relationship, once marred by resentment and misunderstanding, evolved into one of mutual respect. Veronique no longer saw Helena as a threat, but as a mentor and a friend. On a quiet afternoon, Helena and Veronique stood together in the garden, where Helena had once worked in obscurity. The roses bloomed vibrantly, a stark contrast to the tense air that had once hung over the estate. "Do you think I'll ever make things right?" Veronique asked, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Helena looked at her thoughtfully. "Making things right isn't about erasing the past," she said. "It's about building a better future. And you've already started." Veronique nodded, a small but genuine smile forming. "Then I'll keep going." As Helena left the estate for the final time, she turned back to see Veronique standing in the doorway, waving. It was a scene neither of them could have imagined just weeks ago, a moment of closure, but also of hope. The Veronique estate, once a symbol of unchecked privilege, had become a beacon of change, and Helena, once hidden in the shadows, had stepped into the light, proving that even the most unexpected people can inspire transformation. This story reminds us that no matter our past, we all have the power to change and make a difference. But what about you? How would you act if you discovered a secret that could change someone's life? Would you have the courage to stand for the truth, even if it cost you everything? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that spark reflection and change. Your support helps us create content that matters. Thank you for watching.